Hi. So this is my reflection for PBIS. I'm just going to do what I normally do and go off my notes and answer the questions and talk about some of my thoughts about everything that was in the module this week. Um, so the first question is, describe the importance of effectively managing disruptive and non-compliant behaviors. So I think the first step is talking about why this matters. I've read a lot of sort of scary statistics that a lot of teachers end up leaving the field because of behavior problems and not being able to manage student behavior effectively. And basically because if you can't get a handle on it, it could be so exhausting and frustrating that you may just want to choose another career path. That's really scary to me because since I haven't really taught, I've taught lessons here or there, usually with my peers or so not in a real classroom with real students yet. That just makes me pretty nervous to hear. So I guess it's always good just to learn about this stuff now and try to be proactive with some of your strategies and knowing what works for some people, so that way when we do go in the classroom we come in with some knowledge of things to have in our tool belt to use to manage student behavior. I also think it's imperative because I saw this in the module, so I wrote it down because I thought it was really good to know why this is so important. It said, regardless of the nature of disruptive behavior, it often results in loss of instructional time up to 50%, according to some sources, lower academic achievement for the disruptive student and his or her classmates, decreased student engagement and motivation, teacher stress and frustration, teacher attrition. So those are all the effects of what can happen when behavior is not being managed in the classroom. I think that the first thing to know, which is it's also easier said than done, but is to set up an orderly and safe place for the kids to learn. And I think a big way that you can do that is by having a routine. And I think if students know that there's going to be a daily routine, or they have class rules and they know what's expected of them, and they know the consequences, either positive or negative consequences, for the behaviors they have. I think that awareness is key in terms of behavior management. It's all about being really open and having the students know what's expected of them, have them know what will be tolerated, what will not be tolerated, how to go about, say if they need a question answered, the correct way to go about it. Basically, I think that having good methods for or a good routine and having students actually follow the routine, I think that can save a lot of headaches in the long run. I think that sometimes acting out happens when there's a straying from the routine, because then students don't know what's expected of them. And I also think that at the beginning of the year, a lot of these things should be explicitly talked about. I know sometimes, especially in high school and in my content area, we may just think that rules are implied, or we think that kids are old enough to know better. But sometimes that isn't always the case, especially when they have different things expected of them in all their different classes. So I think it's really key to just at the beginning, maybe not spend too much time on it, but to explicitly talk about how things run in your classroom. It's even better if things run the same way in multiple classrooms and it's a school-wide um, type of knowledge of what's appropriate, what's not. That's not always the case. Sometimes I think that it varies, but it is, I think there's strength in numbers when it comes to that. It was also interesting to see how PBIS is sort of related to RTI in terms of the tiered approach, that there's 3 tiers, and then the first tier is universal interventions, and they're meant to be proactive, so just normal things you do to monitor behavior. And then you have the second tier, which is smaller group interventions, and then the third group is somewhat individual interventions when they're needed. And then you'll have less in the upper 2 tiers. I thought that was interesting, that it was a similar model to RTI. Yeah, so those are my basic things. I think that, especially when hearing about all the consequences of not being able to manage behavior that happen to you and to the class, I think that if we keep that in mind, we can really understand why it's important to take a lot of these suggestions seriously and jot them down for future reference, just because, I mean, I actually think this is one of the most crucial parts of a teacher, because I think it's because it worries me so much and I'm so nervous about it, which I don't think it's a bad thing to be nervous. I think it's normal to be nervous when you haven't taught before. But I think that this is something that I have looked into myself, just because even in undergrad, I looked into it myself a little bit, just because I know that in my life I'm sort of a pushover, but I know that that can't fly as a teacher. And I think my sister, who's a teacher, put the fear in me a little, because she's like, these kids are going to walk all over you. You have to make sure that you can stick up for yourself. And so if I really feel strongly about something, I usually do in my life, but I think I really have to learn how to be that authoritative role. I mean, of course, I would want my classroom to be somewhere where students feel comfortable and safe and that we all learn together. But when it comes down to it, I think I really have to learn how to take on the role of manager of behavior. And I'm sure it's not going to be easy, and it may be really scary, but I think with time we eventually are able to learn and adapt to most things. So, but it's good to know that I can use some of these strategies to see if any of them work for me in my future classroom. So 2, discuss the resources on behavioral interventions you found useful. Well, there was one from the module about thinking culturally that I thought was really interesting, because it was a little different than I was thinking about behavior. I didn't think to consider culture right away, but then as reading it made a lot of sense. And it also connected to something my sister told me a couple weeks ago. When I observed her, I asked her why she's so short, and she just says really short sentences, really short directions, and she's not typically like that. And she said, to be honest, she works in an urban environment, and she said, in this urban environment, unless the direction is short, students will tune out or may not listen to you. But if it's short and you're making eye contact with them and it's very direct, that's usually when they listen to you. And I think that's because that's how their parents get them to do stuff at home. And I'm like, well, that's really interesting. It's interesting to see, and depending on where she taught, what strategies she employed. And it was cool to see that in the module too, because it reaffirmed something that she said to me, which sometimes what she says to me goes in and out one ear, and I don't listen to and just think, oh, whatever, that's her teaching. But you know, some of it does apply to what I might be doing. I also liked, in terms of resources, the tricks of the trade videos. I liked that they were just short, little informative videos of tricks you could be using. I really liked the handshake questions idea. I thought that was really clever, and I would love to do that. I think it builds a mutual respect for both the student and the teacher. I like that you're making eye contact and you're having a personal moment with that student. So on one hand, you're holding them personally accountable for the answer of giving you a correct answer, but it's also, in a way, looking at them and saying, hey, having a personal connection with them, and then hoping they respect you enough to, you know, maintain good behavior for the class. I think that that is just like a simple thing that could actually solve a lot of issues, which is really cool just to see this simple idea. And as mentioned, I feel like kids would like that. I think it's a change in their normal routine, and I think I think students like anything where they can be seen as more of an adult, and I think that kind of thing gives them that opportunity. I also liked using signals to communicate with students, like raising of hands or fingers to be quiet, and that's not anything new. I mean, I think we've all seen that before, but it reinforced it just to realize that sometimes classrooms can get out of hand when the teacher's trying to shout over the kids, and sometimes doing the reverse of that, using quiet or using signals, can be just as effective as getting students to behave is yelling. And I think that's something that I probably employ because I don't really like to yell. I sometimes feel uncomfortable raising my voice at people. Like I said, I might have to get used to it at some point if I ever have to show students I'm serious and stuff. But as much as that's possible, I try to use the nonverbal type of cues and signals to get them to behave. I also like that there was a little one about redirecting behavior, because when I first watched it, I didn't understand what the trick was. It happened so fast. And then when he explained just redirecting their behavior, just asking them a different question, can honestly sometimes eradicate the behavior. I was like, oh wow, I just totally missed it. Like, what he even did. And that was just such a simple thing that totally changed the course of direction behavior-wise. And that was really cool to see. Okay, I'll go on to the lesson. Discuss the behavioral interventions you could see yourself using in the future. So the first one, I really liked. I didn't think it was exactly a behavioral intervention, as I thought of it more as an activity. They used it for math. I think that you could easily adapt it for English. Well, I've seen it adapted for English. I should probably tell you what I'm talking about. And they showed it doing a math equation. It was the fishbowl discussion. But I've also seen it adapted for English where they have either a fishbowl debate or a fishbowl discussion. And it's not solving a problem, but more so talking and having a conversation. And I think it's more of an activity, but I do see the behavioral aspects to it. I think they talked about how it helps students create manners, and eventually if you do this a few times, you may see it in the regular class discussion, students being more respectful and waiting their turn to talk and knowing what is appropriate to ask and say. So I thought that was an interesting type of thing. There's also, I really like just even just the simplest of tips, I really think that those can make all the difference. I know that sometimes when things get really serious, you might need to make a behavior modification plan. But I think that trying some of the tips first is good. Like we saw in the one video showed the teacher who, she actually had some good tips of her own, but then she went to, I don't know if she went to Columbia, she went to some school to talk to the teacher, and then she gave her a couple more tips to use, and then she implemented those, and her teaching was even better, it was really cool to see, because it was just some simple things she told her that she used, and it ended up making a really big difference, which was really cool. Some of the ones that I saw was using physical proximity to monitor student behavior. I definitely think I'll do that. Like, I think I can just picture myself doing something like that when students misbehaving, just moving closer to try and see if they stop. Also whispering to students, because I think she said this in the video, it redirects their behavior, but it's in a private way where you're not like making a big spectacle of things. I love the suggestion of using games and competitions to get students engaged. I think that sometimes if students have an outlet and activity where they know they can be a little bit louder and talk freely, then sometimes they'll be more behaved during when they have to. I know that can probably also backfire too, if they don't realize the separate entities of the activities, but I think that it could work. Another thing was breaking down the lesson into the smallest component parts. I think that's something that I probably technically, I think that I might have trouble with that. Sometimes I think in the big ideas, and it's really hard for me to keep breaking it down, and I'm like, oh, this is good. But then sometimes when I go to do a lesson, I realize it wasn't broken down enough, and to me it made sense, but then when I went to do it, there were so many questions and looks and confused faces, which made me realize it should have been broken down more. I think I just have to keep working on that, but it's something that I really am striving for. Another thing is that I really think I'll use is in whole class strategies. I really like the one of putting names on the board for good behavior, or even pointing out that in positive narration, saying so and so has their book closed. And then just using names. I think that at first that made me a little uncomfortable thinking about that, because you're pointing people out. But since it's in a positive way, I've seen that that actually can be a really great thing for reinforcement, because everybody wants to be noticed for the good things. And I remember I was like that in high school too. Like, you always felt good when the teacher gave you positive reinforcement that you had a good answer, or that what you said was good, or what you did was good. So I think that's actually a really simple and good thing that you could start doing. Something I also would employ would be the interdependent group contingencies. We learned about that a couple weeks back when we had the lecture, and we had some of those examples of them, about giving prizes and the scratch-off tickets, and then what was the other? I have to go back and look at it, because I remember I really liked both ideas, and that is something I could totally see myself doing. I think that there's strength in numbers, and that if students know that they'll have a positive reinforcement if they all do something, they're more likely to band together and actually try and get it done, and then they put a little bit of responsibility on each other, which I think getting some responsibility, especially in high school, is a good thing. I think that really helps you become an adult once you see that people depend on you for things. So I don't just think that's a good lesson for in the class. I think that's a good life lesson to learn. So I definitely think I'll use them. I remember when I first saw that lecture, I saved the lecture, and I hope it stays available. I sent it to my sister, because I sent her the ideas for the interdependent, because she's having some behavioral issues sometimes, and I said, maybe if you tried one of these, you never know, maybe it could work. She said she didn't have time to look at them, but you never know. Maybe she'll use them someday. But I thought a lot of those ideas could be really, really good. I think, and like I said, I think it's good to have a little bit of responsibility like that. And who doesn't like rewards? I mean, what student doesn't like a reward? So, I mean, if you can keep up with the reward system, I think that's a great option. Yeah, so those were some of my thoughts. Oh, I was also going to talk about Class Dojo. Yeah, so I actually downloaded that a couple weeks ago when we had the resources link, and I saw that, and I was like, oh, I'll download that. So I did. I haven't started using it yet, obviously, mostly because I don't have a class, but I've been playing around with it and stuff, and I think it's really cool. Well, one of the reasons I think it's really cool is because it can give you the data right away, and it can just organize it in charts and statistics, which is really awesome. I mean, that's one of the advantages of technology, is like at our fingertips we have all these statistics to like look at everything, and I think that's so cool. And I also think it might be good for students to be able to see how they've been behaving, and sort of see it as almost as important as their class grade, because ultimately we are trying to turn students into good citizens, and part of that is knowing appropriate social etiquette and behavior. So I honestly think of it like that. I sort of think of it as a little behavior grade, or a little behavior warning and stuff. And I'm in high school, so the little characters and stuff, I don't know if people might think it's a little lame, but I think I'm going to try it out and see how it goes, and see what students think about it, and see what their parents think about it. I think it's good because you can reinforce good behavior. I think it could be a little bad if parents see it and then go crazy if they see some sort of mark of bad behavior. I mean, I think it's better if you have open communication with the parents and they're notified of these things, but it could be a headache for some parents who can be relentless about. I know some parents who are relentless about perfection, and perhaps even if grades are perfect, if the behavior is bad, that might really bother them. So I think it all depends. I think it's a really cool resource, but I think I'm going to have to use it to really see if it can benefit me in the classroom. But overall, it is a cool resource. Okay, so sorry, this is a really long video too. I guess I write too many notes. But thanks for watching.